Rabbi said we were at a turning point. We had 4 classes, and we talked about all kinds of damages that a person does to a person, beginning with murder, a person killing a person hurting a person killing the property of a person hurting the property of a person, the property of a person hurting a person, the property of a person hurting the person's property, the property of a person killing a person, the property of a person killing the person's property. I didn't say them in the right order, but these are all the different things that we talked about. And more recently, we began to talk about a very important idea. The last couple of weeks, last 2 weeks, we're dominated by an idea that I believe is true based on the Gemara. I think it's true, and you learn the Gemara, the Lumdis, you see that this idea emerges. The last couple of weeks was dominated by the fact that there's 2 concepts of a mazik. The 2 kinds of people who hurt the property of other people. 2 kinds of people's property that hurt the property of other people. The first is in the normal order of life, and the second is a ganav. A ganav is a human being who announces himself that he's not part of the community. A thief who takes the property of somebody else is a human being who's declared himself, I'm not a member of the society, because he's not following the basic rules of society, that what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. And the rules about a ganav are very severe. All other mazikim are treated more gently, with the presumption that if people are going to live together, they're going to hurt each other by mistake, not meaning to hurt each other's property. And accordingly, all the halachos of damages that you find in Torah and in halacha, and again we're learning Parsha Mishpatim, are predicated on the presumption of not malintent. People don't mean to hurt each other. It happens. And that's why the halacha is lenient in many cases about the damage that one does to another. We favor the mazik. We favor the one doing the damage, not the one who was damaged. Which of course is in stark contrast to American law, where you get yourself a lawyer and you do litigation, you sue, and so on and so forth. The Torah's approach towards dealing with damages is very gentle to the mazik if the mazik is a member of the society, unless he's a ganav. Tonight, we shift. We're not talking about money anymore. We're not talking about money. We're done with money. All the halachas of mammon, when it comes to lav, all the laws of money that are in the negative, we finished. Going forward, we're talking about an isur. I don't have time to give you the long version of this, but you'll learn this in the Gemara. Halach is divided up into 4 categories. There's money, there's mammon, there's financial considerations. There's isur. Isur means everything that's to do with between man and God, like kosher and treif, like Shabbos, like taras hamishpacha, like shchita. These are all called halachos of isur. The third is called davar shebe'erva, things that have to do with tznius. And the first is called unshim. There's 4 categories of things in Torah: mammon and isser and erva and oynish. Of the 4, the most lenient is isser, right? When it comes to the name of isser, if you walk into somebody's house and they put food on the table, and you ask them, is this kosher? And he says yes, halachically, unless that person loses his cheskas kashrus, you can eat his own food. A person is considered when it comes to isser. When it comes to arayas, a person is not trust, you have to have 2 edus. When it comes to mammon, you have to have 2 edus. And when it comes to einshim, you also have to have 2 edus. These are 4 categories in Jewish law. Everything we learned until now was mammon. The taking of a life is not mammon, that's the truth. But the more recent thing to talk about was money. Now we're talking about isser, things that are not allowed, not because of a financial consideration, because Hashem doesn't allow it. Ben Adam Lamokan. Okay, and here again you're going to see playing out the foundation that I'm setting. Understand something, people. I'm giving you Shurim and Pashas Mishpatim. So I got to make it up. I have to make it work. So am I twisting a little? Am I pulling? And in other words, is this Torah semis? What I'm teaching you, is it absolutely true? I don't think so. It's a pshat. Or if you want to be more candid, it's a pshetel. In Pashas Mishpatim, but I'm spinning Pashas Mishpatim to serve my purposes of trying to develop an evolution, a shtalshus of the mitzvahs in what looks like an orderly fashion. That's my goal. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay, so let me tell you where we're holding. We finished dealing with financial involvement between a person and a person where there's damage involved. You do something wrong. And again, I repeat, when it comes to a person damaging a person financially, there's two considerations. If a person is a ganef, if a person is a thief, which means he doesn't respect the society at all, he's punished very severely. He pays double and so on. But if a person does damage, or a person's property does damage, within the normal scheme of life, we're quite kind to him. We almost don't make him pay for full damage, based on the fact that it's normal. It's part of life. I mean, the most extreme example, which came up last week. If I am a shoyel, if I borrow your garden hose, I didn't pay you a penny for it, and I broke it. But I broke it, machmas melocha, I broke it because I was using the garden hose. I'm completely potter. You know why? Because I used the garden hose the way you would have used it, and if you had done what I did, it would have also broken, so I'm potter, but it's not my garden hose, it's your garden hose. The answer is, this is what happens in a community. I lend you my hose today, you lend me your wheelbarrow tomorrow, and the day after he lends somebody else his shovel. So there's the laws assume what you would call civility. People live in the RaMbaM's famous words are Adam Medini, no human being. We're not cats. We can't live solitary lives. We need each other. We live in a community. And the halachos of mazik, unless by a ganev and the like, are very kind or semi-kind to the mazik based on the fact that this is considered normal. But there's two sides to this coin. And this is what I want to start with tonight, okay? We're going to be talking about Yonam of Isser. We're talking about Einus Mefah. We're going to be talking about Gili Aroyes and Avodah Zarah. The next couple of halachos, I'm telling you up front, you don't have to stay in suspense about Gili Aroyes and Avodah Zarah. So I want to set up the continuum. I want to explain to you how these things follow each other, okay? We established as a foundational thought that in a community people live together. In a community, people live together. I have my house, you have your house. Between my house and your house, there may be a fence. But I don't have to sit a whole day and a whole night and wonder you're going to climb over my fence. Why? Because you're normal and I'm normal. I respect you, you respect me. It's part of life. It's the way we live. So there is a presumption, I think this is a true presumption in halacha, that honorable people, regular people, unless they're ganovim, when they live together in a community, respect each other's property. They use each other's property, they help each other, they're helped by one another, but there's a respect. But there's two sides to the coin. One side of that coin is that we share, we help each other. I have a garden hose and you need it. You have a shovel and I need it, I lend you my garden hose, you lend me your shovel. You give me back the shovel, it's a little bit twisted. I don't say, wait, you broke my shovel, give me a new one. It's part of life. Unless I broke it on purpose. If it's mesa machmas belocha, the damage happened while I was doing the same kind of work that I would have done with the same item, I'm potter. But there's another side to this coin. This is very important. And the other side of this coin is that there is such a thing in Torah as ownership. Even though in a community people share. But sharing doesn't mean we're not communists. We don't believe that everything belongs to everybody. If I have a garden hose and you have a shovel and here's a wheelbarrow, we don't say, okay, everybody has a garden hose, everybody has a shovel, everybody has a wheelbarrow. That's not the way it works. I own the garden hose. I'll share it with you, and if you break it while you're using it, maybe you'll be potted, but it's mine. I'm going to tell you a story that happened with your Zayde, your Elta Baba, your Baruch Brik Mazaneinikal, right? Your Kalman Brik Mazaneinikal. So your uncle Baruch, Elta Baruch, told me an interesting story. I'm not going to say names because I don't want trouble. This is the middle of the Second World War. I heard the story from Baruch, who was a boy at the time. Your uncle. Your Baba was alone. Your grandmother had 3 children. Her husband went to the front. Almost everybody who went to the front was killed. Your Zayde came back. He came back without fingers, but he came back. Zayde Isser. I once asked your great uncle, how did your Zayde survive when everybody else was killed? He said, because he wasn't in the infantry. He was a cannoneer. He was in the mortars. So he wasn't mamish on the front lines. In other words, if you went into battle, you know how the Russians used to go to fight in the Second World War? 4 soldiers ran with 1 gun. Kipshute. At the beginning of the war, there were 4 soldiers. The guy dropped, next guy took his gun, and he kept running. And when that's how they operated. And the Nazis were slaughtering them like you cut grass. It was unbelievable. And the Russians had no regard for the lives of their own citizens. Pardon me, but that's a fact of life, okay? Any case, so they were living in Samarkand, I think, during the war. Not Tashkent. Your Baba was alone with 3 little children. There was no money. People were starving, dying from hunger, kipshute. And my Elta Zayde, whose name I will say, The Bisal Nevlet was a big chassid. Bisal Levin, Halevi, Bisal Levin Levin Nevel, used to walk across the whole Tashkent. He had no shoes. Your uncle described how he walked. He put on his feet shmates. He had no shoes. Shmates. He wrapped them in gauze, whatever it was he could get. He walked across the entire city. He came to where your grandmother lived with 3 little kids, and they had this metal gate to the front of the house, like a chutzner. He had a metal stick. He would bang on the gate, and he would say to your Baba, her name was Daba, I think, yeah? Du lebst, you're alive? And she would say, I'm alive. And he wouldn't even walk into the house. He would go back. He came every few days. He wanted her to know that there's a person in this world thinking about her. That's how lonely it was. And your uncle was a little boy, and he didn't forget it. That's how meaningful it was. So one day your grandmother, this is your great-grandmother, came to Bisal Nevel with a big taina. One of the great chassidim, whose name I'm not going to say, heard that your grandmother had some money.
Had what?
Had money, jengia per dollar, geld. So he came to the house, and he got one of the children, naively, to give him the money. He took the money and he put it in the coop of Temchet Mimim. He put it in the stock. She said, I'm a woman alone. Okay, I'm not an almana, but I'm an almana chaya. I don't know if I'll ever see my husband again. And I have a few dollars. You take my money and put it in Temchet Mimim. So this chassid said, this is the way, everything belongs to tzedakah. You need money, we'll give you. Temchet Mimim will give you money. But it's not your money, it's Temchet Mimim's money. Now this chassid, I promise you, he did it not with his money, with his shoes he did it. He wasn't a hypocrite. He practiced it. But Rachmanis was not his middle name, you know what I'm saying? So she went to Yisrael Nevlet, who was much older than that chassid, and said, how do you take my money? I'm a woman alone with 3 kids and take money, put Temchet Mimim. So Yisrael Nevlet went to that chassid, whose name rhymes with Piyu, and Yishakeni, and he said to him, what did you do? So they had an argument. He said, what do you mean? Everybody knows, in the middle of a war, people were literally dying from hunger. No food. Everything is Temchet Mimim, and everybody knows that Temchet Mimim, Rebbe Nevel argued, they got him to give the money back. And I heard this from your Uncle Baruch more than once, but I'm telling this story to bring out a point. Judaism doesn't believe in communism. Judaism believes in mine and yours. There's a division of rishus. We all live together. And I'll lend you my garden hose. You'll lend me your shovel. He'll lend him his wheelbarrow. And he'll lend him his lawnmower or his clips. But it's mine. It's mine. In Torah, there is a division of rishuyas. My father is a big chassid and a very big thinker. Says ownership comes from God. Do animals own land? Do animals own land? Animals have a territory that they mark and they fight for, but they don't own it. Because what's the siman of ownership? The siman of ownership is I have a homestead and I put up a fence, and you come and you see my fence, you don't even try to take my property. You say it's yours. Unless I'm a ganef. A ganef is a different story. But most old people you see in the middle of a desert, a fence that belongs to somebody, it's not mine. By animals, the Eibishter gave human beings the power of ownership. It belongs to me. I'll give it to you, but it's mine. And this idea is the other side of this coin. When you're talking about mammon, business, we say we live together as a community. I'll lend you my garden hose, you'll lend me your shovel. If you break my garden hose while you're using it to water your lawn, you're not going to have to pay for it because it's called Mesa Machmas Malacha, but it's still mine. It's not yours. You broke my hose. You didn't buy the community's hose because everything has an owner. Everything has an owner. Now, Rabbi Isai, in ownership, there's 2 madregas. Number 1, it belongs to someone. Number 2, it doesn't belong to anybody. Right? In halacha, there's something called the Rishus HaRabbim. What's the Rishus HaRabbim? It belongs to everybody. What's the Rishus HaYachid? It belongs to me. What's in between Rishus HaYachid and Rishus HaRabbim? Something called Mokum P'tor. Mokum P'tor means land that belongs to no one. Rishus HaRabbim belongs to everyone. Mokum P'tor belongs to no one. Something that belongs to no one. Can I take it? A midbar, a desert. The sea, the yam, they're considered Mokum P'tor. some land that belongs to no one. It's a desert, yeah? Is it mine? The answer is I have to make it mine. And I make it mine by making a kinyan. I establish ownership. I put up a fence. Naga, the Ropolatz, after what you call the yeshiva shesprach, I have to make a chazaka. It doesn't belong to anybody, but I need to take it and make it mine. If someone is mafkir something, someone says it's hefker, I own a cow, I'm making it hefker. You don't own that cow because you ride on it. You own that cow because you pull it. You make meshicha. You have to make a kinyan. You have to make it yours. So what I'm pointing out is that ownership has two madregas. It's not enough that I'm not taking yours. I have to make it mine. You see the difference? If something belongs to nobody and I use it, that's not correct. If something belongs to you, somebody, and I want to use it, I have to first make it mine, then I can use it. You follow the logic? So what I'm trying to present to you is that in continuation with all the halachos of mammon that we discussed in the last couple of weeks, and what was the foundational idea? The foundational idea is that we live in a community, and if we're honest people, unless we're ganavim, the halacha presumes that we don't mean to hurt each other, and the law therefore benefits the mazik, the one who did the damage, not the nizik, not the one who was damaged. Why? Today I broke your hose, tomorrow you'll break my shovel. The classic example is if a man marries a woman and he brings pots and pans into the marriage and she breaks a pot, so does she have to pay for it? Technically she does. But you understand yourself what kind of Rosh Marusha a guy has to be to charge his wife money for breaking his pot. You can't live like that. And the halach is designed to follow that philosophical presumption. But now I'm giving the other side of the coin. Even though it's true that because we live in a community, there is a certain concept of sharing, but on the other hand, it has to be private. And private doesn't only mean that I don't take what's yours. Private means if there's something that belongs to no one, before I use it, I make it mine. I make it mine. Okay? And I'm going to give you an example. This is not an example in money, this is an example in tznius. Okay? The RaMbaM speaks about a kdesha. A kdesha is a woman who's not married, she doesn't belong to anybody, and I don't want to marry her. According to the RaMbaM, this is an issa lav of kdesha. A woman, she's not married, I don't want to marry her, but I say, what's wrong? She doesn't belong to anybody. Why can't I have a relationship with her? And the answer is, you want to have a relationship with a woman, you have to marry her. You cannot have a relationship with a woman unless you marry her. But I'm not doing an aveda. You're talking about doing an aveda. What aveda? She went to the mikveh, she kosher, no problem. There's an issa lav of kadesha. The RaMbaM's lashon is miyachado la'atzmei machniso der beis. You have to make her mine. Okay, so what's the point? Here's a person. She doesn't belong to a man. I'm not hurting anybody by having a relationship with her, but I don't want to make her mine. I don't want to make her mine, so it's usur. What's the aveda? The aveda is that the way Hashem set up the world. If I am going to partake of this world, I have to make it mine first. There's a field, and I want to use that field, and I don't want you to come tomorrow and take it from me. I put up a fence. I make it mine. And if I don't put up the fence, I don't make it mine, Torah has a problem with it. You can come along, and after I work for hours and hours in that field, I mean, obviously if you worked for hours and hours and maybe a shalaf and a chazaka, you could have made it yours through that act, I can take it from you. Why? You have to make it your own. So what is the first example of isid in the Parsha Mishpatim? After you have pages and pages, and for us it's 4 classes on inyanim of mammon, of financial issues, financial situations, what's the first example of an inyan of isur? Mefata. You know what mefata means? She's a single girl, and you seduce her. You seduce her. You can't say you're seducing her for an aveda. She's a single girl. Mefata is a lav. And you have to pay her money. Mefata, you seduce a girl. There's something called oinus, where you rape a girl. That's a big aveda, right? But again, we're talking about a single girl. She's not married, she's not betrothed, she's a single girl. You mefata her, you seduce her. It's an issa lav, and you have to pay chamishim kesef, or whatever the case is. Why? What's my aveda? My aveda is, in this world where the Eibishter made it, before I use something, I need to make it my own. Just like if I want to use a piece of real estate, I have to make it my own. I can't just leave it public and use it as I wish. I have to make it my own. So when it comes to isid, it's the same thing. When it comes to isid, it's the same thing. I want to have a relationship with a woman, I have to marry her.
I just married her.
Give her a ring. What I'm trying to present you is I'm trying to create the continuity in the Parsha. That since we were talking about money, and when we talked about money, we talked about the idea that even something that's mine, if you're a member of the society and you break it, maybe you're not so mechuyev because there's an element of sharing. But there's another side to that coin. Mine is mine and yours is yours. So the halacha follows up all those halachas of Dalit Shemidim, which we learned last week. Where in one case, I give you all the benefit and I get nothing. In the other case, I get all the benefit and you get nothing. And in the other two cases, you gain a little and I gain a little. As I explained to you last week, we move on to the next situation. You should know that in Jewish law, even though in a civilization, in a community, people share, but there's still ownership. And one of the symptoms of this lack of ownership is that if I take something, which doesn't, I'm not hurting anybody, but I'm not making it my own, I'm not allowed to do it. Now wait, what comes after mefata? I'm continuing now. What comes after mefata? Mefata means I'm not doing something wrong. I guess that's the way to phrase it, but I'm doing something which isn't right. I want to use something from this world and I don't want to make it mine. It's not allowed. Again, the example that's brought in other places like Kdesha. But I'm stretching Kdesha to mefata. It's a very bad stretch. Any person listening to the shir knows anything he's going to say, a hakta chaynik. But I'm desperate to create this continuity, and that's how I'm making this continuity. What comes after mefata? Mechashefa leisachaya. What's a mechashefa? A man or a woman who does kishuf, magic. But mechashefa is not a person who does kishuf. There's different kinds of kish, different kinds of magic. There's many kinds of magic which is only an isalav, and it's mutter for a goy. A psychic, are you allowed to go to a psychic? I don't know whether a psychic is considered a kaisim, but some kinds of clairvoyance, some kinds of people who can tell you the future are isaskila. If you go to them, you have skila, misa. Other kind of clairvoyance, it's only isa malchus. Why? Because a lot of these people who have the extra sense to be able to tell you the future and so on and so forth are not connected to Avodah Zarah. If they're not connected to Avodah Zarah, it's only an isalav. Mechashefa is a magician who tells you the future, and you have skila for going to Mechashefa. Mechashefa leisachaya. Why? Because she uses Avodah Zarah. She uses Avodah Zarah to make her determination. So think about the evolution. Think about the evolution. What's Avodah Zarah? I take on somebody else's wife. I take on somebody else's wife. The Eibishter is married to Yidden, right? And then the Yidden bring into the Beis HaMikdash another God. That's disloyalty.
But you're saying something from a.
So before we talked about mefata, it's two steps. First you speak about an Aveira where I'm not doing anything wrong, but I'm not making her my own. And then you go from that to a Nisaskila. What's a Nisaskila? Avodah Zarah is the same thing as Gili Aroyes. It's just been Ad Lamokim. What's Gili Aroyes? I'm married to one person, I'm not supposed to have a relationship with another person. A relationship with another person, I'm violating, and I'm going to use these oises, the laws of ownership. It's not mine. When I have one God and I get involved with another God, I violated the law of ownership, right? I mean, we're the wife in this relationship. The Eibush is the husband, we're the wife. When we worship another God, we work Megala Arayis. That's how the story of Rachel and Leah goes, right? The famous story called Barama Nishma, right? Where Rachel Imeinu comes to the Eibishter and says, you got to forgive the Jews. And the Eibishter says to Rachel Imeinu, how can I forgive the Jews? They brought my tzara into my house. They brought my competition into my home. So Rachel says to the Eibishter, I did the same thing. I brought Leah into my house. Right? The story of Rachel and Leah, what's one of the most poignant parts of the story? Does anybody remember? What's one of the most poignant parts of the story? Rachel sees Lavan taking Leah. And it's dark. Yaakov can't see her. Now Yaakov had given Rachel signals that Rachel, that when he was choishish Lavan, that when they're in the dark, Lavan, Rachel, Yaakov Avinu will know it's Rachel because she'll know the signals. She gave the signals to Leah. Why did she do it? Why did she do it? Why did she do it? Her sister shouldn't be embarrassed. So the Eibusha says to Rachel, they took another wife, actually took another husband. So Rachel said, I did the same thing. I brought my competitor into my home. And the Eibusha says, yeah, I can't argue with that. But that's when you want the Eibusha to forgive you. But how is it supposed to be? You're married to one person. Kishuf is an Issa Skila, not because you're not allowed to predict the future, because it uses Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is like another God means I'm not loyal to Hashem. So you have to think of it in two steps. Step number one.
That's the definition of the kishuf that's skillas because it's avodah zarah.
Of course.
It's not a separate.
No, it's not Avodah Zarah. All those in Yonim, Kaisim, and Menachesh, which are brought in Hilchas Avodah Zarah, but they're only in Yisalav. Why? Because in that case, I'm not going to another God, I'm just not being loyal to mine. Like there's a mitzvah sasei, tom im tia im Hashem elekech. What does that mean? I have one God. Whenever I have an issue, I go only to Him. If I go to somebody else, if he's a competitor, it's a second ownership. That's the worst scenario. But if he's not a competitor, he doesn't belong to anybody. It's like mafata. I'm not hurting anybody. But it's not mine. But kishif is a skila because it's somebody else's. So the way I'm teaching with these halachos, again, I'm inventing this, is after you learn all the halachos of civility, you remember that there's such a thing as ownership. And ownership means two things. Number one, I'm not allowed to take what's yours. And number two, if I want to use something, I have to first make it mine. And if I don't make it mine, I've done something wrong, that's mafata. And if I take something which is yours, it's even worse, and that's kishif, mechashev. Because avodah zarah is gilei arayes benad lamakam. That's what it is. That's how it's described in Chazal. And you see this for sure. Avodah zarah, gilei avodah zarah. Having another God is like a woman taking another husband. I'm married to the Eibush, I'm taking another husband. And in that case, it's not only the pshat that it's not mine, it's somebody else's. And that's why it's a nisiskila. So the way I'm presenting it to you, it's b'derech loizu afzu. That in conjunction with the financial laws of sharing, we have the financial idea of ownership, and it's presented through davashal isser, not moment. Mefata means it's not anybody else's, but I didn't make it mine. And mechashefa means it's somebody else's. And when I use it, it's a big aveda. Because in Torah, even though we live in a community and we share, but it's got to be mine, it's not allowed to be somebody else.
Why would it stretch to it would just say straight up, not commit adultery in this, if you're going in that order?
A point well taken. So you stumped the rabbi, you just ruined the whole continuity. Okay, I'm trying to make it work, and you're right, you're absolutely right. I said it from the beginning. But if you look at these ideas not as the specifics, but as the philosophy that's behind them, it's the same philosophy. Now, so the first halacha that we learned is mafate, right? I'm taking something which isn't mine. It's not anybody's, it's not mine. The second halacha is mechashefa. I'm taking something that belongs to somebody else. It's a bigger aveda. And the third is a roiva and a nirba, which means having a relationship with an animal. Having a relationship with an animal is a issa misa. Now, what about an animal? An animal is gilaroyes, right? An animal doesn't belong to me. And an animal not only doesn't belong to me, it can't belong to me. I can't have that relationship with an animal. In other words, the relationship of roiva and nirva is not just that it is in mine. The roiva and nirva means it belongs to somebody else. It has nothing to do with me. So it's doubly wrong. A, I don't own it. B, there's a different ownership. Animals and human beings are not supposed to get together. They're not in the same world when it comes to this inyan. So that's why roiva and nirva is very similar to mechashefa. Mechashefa means it's not only that I don't own it, somebody else does. An animal, even it's my animal. He's in my stable. I financially own it. But when it comes to gilei arayis, that animal belongs to somebody else. To the Eibishter. There's no way I can possess that animal in this way. I'm thinking that maybe you could say it's even worse than taking somebody else's. It's not something that can be possessed in this way. But let's be simple in our creativity, if you will. Roiva and nirva means I'm involved with an animal that I can't possibly marry. Not I didn't marry them, I can't possibly marry them. So by the virtue of the fact that I can't possibly marry them, not only it isn't mine, it can't be mine. It belongs to somebody else. Misa. Skila, Misa. And the next halacha, right after that, is Avodah Zarah. And of course, you're going to say to me, the sequence is wrong. You have Gilei Arayos, Avodah Zarah, Gilei Arayos, Avodah Zarah. The sequence is wrong. And frankly, I have not figured out a way to explain these four things. But I'm just explaining it to you in general, as they say in American, basically. That the first halach is talking about I'm partaking of something which isn't mine, even though it's not yours. And the next three are I'm taking something that belongs to somebody else. And this is the whole idea of Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is the biggest Aveda. And by the way, I've told this to you in previous classes. I told it to you last week. There's a rule in Torah. I think it's a logical law, but we can argue about it. There's a rule in Torah that says there's no such thing as a rule without an exception. Every rule has to have an exception. Like I gave you the example last week with the Ba'al Ime. Right? I borrow your garden hose. But when I borrowed your garden hose, you were working for me. I'm potted even from Pshia. Even if I broke it because of negligence. There's no explanation for Ba'al Ime. It's a Gezerah Sakosov. Now I'm sure there's lumdim will come up with explanations, but it shows that even when when I'm the shayel, I borrow, I'm getting all the benefits, you're losing everything. And therefore I'm choyev einstein. If that garden hose gets ruined in some way, even if it's an accident, I have to pay for it. But there's an exception. Every rule is an exception, with one exception. The only rule in Torah that doesn't have any exceptions is Avodah Zarah. Avodah Zarah is so severe. I told this to you last week, that if you could save a person's life using a medical remedy from Avodah Zarah, you're not allowed to use it. Let's let that person pass away. You're not allowed to use Avodah Zarah even for Pekuach Nefesh. Because Avodah Zarah is a woman taking another husband. So I am stumped a little bit about the sequence. Mefata, Mechashefa, Reiva Nirva, and Avodah Zarah. But I'm offering you a basic understanding. Number one, I should not use something, even if it doesn't belong to you, until I make it mine. And number two, and I certainly should not use something that belongs to you. And in Yeshivish, it's called Loizu Avzu. But that a klal, you say a smaller chiddush, and then you say a bigger chiddush. Here you say the bigger chiddush, and then you say the smaller chiddush. First you say, even if it doesn't belong to you, until I make it mine, I shouldn't use it. And then you say, if it's not mine, if it belongs to you, I shouldn't use it. It's going from a bigger chiddush to a smaller chiddush, and this is a derech in Torah also. Okay, we got through four things. Again, I'm not entirely satisfied with the sequence. I mean, I wrote myself a bunch of notes, but we're going to stop now. And like I said to you before, I think next week is going to be our last class. And Mitzvah Shem, I'm just going to finish the lavim, the negative commandments. And if I'll be in the mood, and I'll still think it makes sense, I'll do the rest of it next year. Okay, good night. Thank you for listening.